Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by FullSail University, offering a variety of master's degree programs in data and technology-related fields, including an Innovation and Entrepreneurship Master's. To learn more about FullSail's master's degree programs, visit FullSail.edu/TWiST. And by Citrix Sharefile, secure file transfer built for business. Visit sharefile.com, click on the microphone, and enter TWiST for a free 30-day trial. And by AWS Activate, the Amazon Web Services Startup Program. It's easy to start and scale your business with AWS. Visit aws.amazon.com/activate. Today's episode is a two-parter from the DFJ CEO Summit in San Jose, California, featuring Jeff Lawson, CEO and co-founder of Twilio, and Harper Reed, CEO of Modest Incorporated and CTO from the Barack Obama 2012 reelection campaign. As always, he is at Jason, and we are at TWI Startups on Twitter and Instagram.
That's what it's all about, man. They said, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah. Money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Thanks for...
Great, thank you.
Wow, packed house out there. Thanks for having me. And how many people are entrepreneurs in the room, like running a company? Raise your hand nice and high. Great. And how many people are investors in the room? Raise your hand nice and high. Okay. And how many people work at a big company that's going to buy one of the little companies here today? Raise your hand. Great. Okay.
So the guy raised his hand all 3 times.
Right. That was Tim Draper. He does everything. Okay, so you guys are in for a treat. I've known Jeff for a long time, and Jeff is a CTO turned CEO who has built one of the most meaningful companies of the last 10 years in Silicon Valley, very quietly. Does anybody here use the Twilio API? Let me ask that of the companies here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, wow, it's like 10 people.
Thank you.
Thank you. He'll be giving you discount codes later. This company has grown tremendously. I think you have about 350 people now, and you did $50 million last year, according to, I guess, the press sources. And I'm assuming if you raise that huge round of funding, you're going to doubled or tripled that. But when you started this company, the pitch was, we're going to connect the phone system to apps and the web. This seemed like a pitch that people would be like, why does that matter? Because nobody was really connecting our phone numbers or messaging systems on the phones to websites or apps, and I don't think anybody saw the purpose of it. What did you see back then, and what was the reaction of VCs? Because I'm sure they did not get it. In large part.
So in 2008, I was going out to VCs to raise a seed round, and had this idea. There's this platform and its APIs to enable communications at global scale. And at the time, I went out, and the common wisdom that I got back from venture capitalists was, no, wait, this doesn't make any sense. You don't build an API as the product. The API is the side project of the main product, right?
Right.
And you say, why don't you go out and go build a PBX or go build a call center software. And once you're successful, you add an API in order to enable your business development or something like that, right? That's what Facebook did, right? Seems to have worked out well for them. That's the model of what APIs are for. And, I basically had a fundamentally different view for a number of reasons. First was, we didn't want to build one thing. We didn't want to build a PBX. What we saw was that communications is one of the fundamental primitives of technology. And as such, it would get incorporated into everything that we have. And so it wasn't one use case, it was like thousands of use cases. And that's why we were so focused on building it as a platform, because it is part of everything that we do. And I think this was a unique perspective. By the way, the other thing that people said was that developers aren't an audience, developers aren't a market, you can't go to market to developers. And so I think we had a unique point of view on both of those things. Number one, which was, why is it an API as opposed to a product? Well, my own experience, so you'd mentioned I'd been the CTO. I'd been the CTO of 3 companies before starting Twilio.
And they were significant companies. Was it StubHub?
One of them was significant.
StubHub, you would say?
Yeah, StubHub
right, yeah.
obviously became significant, and then two others that weren't as significant. But the key thread here that I realized was that at every single one of those companies, we needed communications in order to build our business. Right, and so at each one of these companies, we're software people, right? We're building software, we maintain a backlog, we operate in sprints, we're shipping constantly, listening to our customers, right? That's how we operated. And when we needed communications, we turned to the communications industry, and the industry didn't work at all like that. So I'll give you an example. At StubHub, this was the year 2000, we said, if we're gonna sell tickets online and exchange them between a seller and a buyer, we need to do it last minute, right? When the street commerce is happening outside, that's when we need to be competing, right? And so we said, when you buy a ticket online the day of an event, we will automate a phone call to the seller, hey, your ticket's sold. Then we'll dial down a list of couriers in the city and say, hey, can you do this delivery? And then we'll dial the buyer and say, hey, buyer, your courier is showing up in 2 minutes with your tickets, which is actually funny because that workflow actually looks a lot like what Uber and Lyft and all these companies are doing today, right? And so that was the workflow we had, and we said, okay, let's go figure out how we would do this. And we go to industry, and the communications industry said, yeah, here's your forklift in, big hardware, big software solutions. And they take 2 years to implement, and they take $2 million. And, that was just how it was. It was a hardware-based industry.
Literally solving that problem took how long?
Yeah, they were saying, this is 2 years, you're spinning up professional services.
But did you actually execute on it or no?
Oh, no, God, no. We
So
said,
even-
they're saying 2 years and $2 million. We're like, our company is 6 weeks old, and we have $100,000 in the bank.
Right.
You're like, this is a completely different cadence. It's like an impedance mismatch between two industries.
Right.
Software, which is agile, and communications, which is just the opposite, right? And you think about carriers, they innovate on the order of decades.
Right.
Where you want caller ID, it takes them a decade to roll that out, right?
Yeah.
And then you want to block caller ID, you're like, okay, well, we'll do that next decade, right? That's the pace.
Coming in 2025.
Yeah, exactly. And what we're seeing now is this complete shift from that very hardware-based, physical-based world where, if you think about it, the story of Twilio begins 150 years ago when Alexander Graham Bell plugged a speaker and a microphone together with copper wire and made the first telephone. And while over the ensuing 150 years, the technology has gotten substantially more complex and sophisticated, how we use that invention is practically unchanged for 150 years, right? Despite the fact that, went from operators to pulse to touchtone. That was basically the only change that occurred in that technology that changed how we interacted with it. Other than that, it was just I picked up a device and I dialed 10 digits and I said hello, right? And that's basically how we've used that invention for 150 years. I mean, the phone app on my iPhone is identical in functionality to the $10 Panasonic phone I had when I was 12 years old.
Right.
Trying to call my girlfriends. Right?
Yeah. Star, pound.
Right. It is literally functionally identical to that piece of plastic that I had as a 10-year-old. And it's pretty amazing. Well, what's happening right now is the biggest shift in the history of telecommunications in that 150 years. And that is this migration from hardware to software.
Right.
Right. So it used to be for that 150 years, you were constrained by the lowest common denominator of this global network based on physical things, wires and boxes sitting in closets of carriers and enterprises. And now we're moving into this complete software world,
right.
Where all of our communications are going to become more meaningful and relevant because they're integrated into everything else that we're doing.
Hey, everybody, just want to take a moment to talk to you about FullSail University's online innovation and entrepreneurship master's degree program. It's an intensive 12-month program, and you're going to learn the process for developing a tech-based product or service. Sound familiar? Yeah, it does. It should. And the courses include the ideation process, product design and development, and financial strategies. These are all taught by industry-leading instructors, and you will graduate with a fully formed business strategy and the tools to pitch potential investors like me. Other Full Sail master's degree programs include internet marketing, business intelligence, and public relations. And our director Jacob, actually went there. And that's one of the reasons we hired him, is because he's just so awesome and entrepreneurial and on point. So you can learn more about Full Sail's master's degree program in innovation and entrepreneurship, or any of their related programs. Just go to FullSail.edu/TWiST. FullSail.edu/TWiST. It's a great program. People say great things about it, and you're going to learn a lot. You can follow them on Twitter and thank them on Twitter at Full Sail. Thanks again to Full Sail University. Let's get back to this amazing program.
So when you went out, take me back to that first round of funding. Either did you do an angel round or a...
Yeah, we did a seed round.
Yeah, and then you started meeting with VCs too. When you got all those no's or confusion or, hey, you're doing it wrong, Jeff.
You're holding it wrong, yeah.
You're doing it wrong, right? Like, do it this way. How did you, as a first-time CEO founder, coming from the CTO space, talking to, very powerful investors, and it was a different time then, right?
Not that powerful.
Well, now we realize that, right? But back in 2007, it was a different time for entrepreneurs, right? We were,
actually, just for all the entrepreneurs in the room, half of you may not like this, right? But if you, as a early entrepreneur, you often do think of the investors have all the power, right? And I'm going out with my hand out, and I actually think that through the course of my fundraising, we've raised 5 rounds now, $110 million. And through the course of all those interactions with investors, one of the things I came to realize, which I think is good advice for entrepreneurs, is that it's not like that. It's not they hold all the power and you're with your hand out. This is an ecosystem. Right. Investors have money that they need to invest in great companies in order to be successful at their jobs.
Right.
You hopefully have a great company and you want money to infuse into it in order to build an even better company. And so it's a peer relationship. And I think if you walk into the room with that hat on,
things go better.
Things go better, but I think it makes you feel better about your interactions.
It has changed though, because in that time period, you may have had that belief, but the way the business operated in, the early part of Twilio's life, the VCs did have a little bit more power than the entrepreneurs. Then it kind of leveled off, and now doesn't feel like the entrepreneurs maybe the balance of power has tipped, where you have entrepreneurs getting complete control of their company, no information rights.
It's not a matter about control and information. It's a matter of, if you think that the investors have all the power, you build a company and you do your job that is going to suit the needs of the investor.
Right.
And what you should be doing is suiting the needs of your customer. And if you do a good job of that, then the investor side of things should take care of itself.
Right.
That's my point, right? And so if you think about...
And the right investors understand that because they've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So... you were not rattled when they said, don't do it this way. You just waited for the right people to say yes.
Just had a different point of view, right? Yeah. So, one was this notion of, I had at 3 companies in a row, needed communications delivered as a agile software service.
Right.
And the industry hadn't built it yet.
Got it.
And so I observed the need. And then the second thing that I think was unique was the question of, are developers a market? And people said, developers don't hold the purse strings, developers don't make decisions. And I said, false. Developers make architectural decisions all the time. And in the world of software, and especially, infrastructure as a service, the architectural decisions made by developers have business and revenue impact for the vendors that are picked. And I saw this at Amazon. I was a product manager at AWS. Before I started Twilio. So between starting 3 companies and starting Twilio, I was a PM at AWS, and you saw this happening there, right? And then the other thing...
Bottom up.
Yeah, bottom up,
Selection of vendors.
I want to use it, so I was a product manager for SQS at one point in time, the queuing service. And you're like, oh, this little queue component that an architect, there's no business development person isn't going to go out and source a queue that costs 5 zeros per operation. You're like, right. Developers just can pick it off the shelf, and it grows. And I saw this also when I was the CTO of StubHub. So the year was 2000. The thing that I knew from my first company was Cold Fusion.
Sure.
That dates me, right?
Jeremy Allaire?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I had used, it was the first thing I learned when I started figuring out the web in 1997 or whatever. And so I came in to StubHub, and so of course I brought in Cold Fusion. Right, and I don't even think we paid for it at the time, right? We're a startup with no money. We just sort of pirated it or whatever, whatever we did. And of course, as the company grew, that decision that I made, because it was the tool I knew, resulted in probably tens of thousands of licenses of Cold Fusion sold to StubHub and then eBay. Right? That's because as the developer, it was the tool I knew and the tool that I brought in to solve the problem that ended up having huge business impact.
Okay, so let's talk about the first year or two, because I think you guys launched in 2006 or so?
2008.
2008, okay. So,
in fact, today is our 6-year anniversary of our launch.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So at that time, 2008, iPhone 3 is out, or is it iPhone 2? And people still...
First one was just coming out, because they announced it in 07 and then came
07.
Out
Okay, so
I think
those are just starting to come out. And how did you get the first dozen real clients? Because this is, one of the things that a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is, hey, how do I get the flywheel going? So let's talk about how did you get that first cohort, and then we'll get to how did you make it into a machine and get the flywheel going?
Yeah, so one of the filters that I have for ideas is when I have an idea, I would go to people who are potentially in the audience for that idea. And I just say, hey, I have this idea, and I explain what problem I think it solves for that person, right? And then I really closely watch their reaction. And again, this isn't like investors, it's someone who should be an adopter of the product. And I did this multiple times. Actually, that company, Arrow, the cable?
Yeah, the Barry Diller's company that just got shut down.
Yeah, I didn't know it was Barry Diller.
I think it was the one that would take over the air,
and
they put it on a DVR, and then you could pull it up on your phone.
So I had that idea in 2005, 2006, or whatever. And I just thought it'd be interesting, like this sort of, you can hack the regulatory environment for cable companies and just create a BitTorrent-based cable company that could fly somewhat.
What could go wrong?
Sort of legally. And it was just sort of one of these interesting ideas. And so I went to people who I thought were potential customers of it, and I told them the idea. And every time I did, they'd say, hey, did you see the Lions game last weekend? Right?
Right.
How's the weather?
They were polite.
Right, they're polite, and it's awkward, and they change the topic, right? And you do that enough times.
Totally keep me posted on that.
Yeah. Let me know how that turns out, right?
Yeah. Another way of saying, I have no interest in what you're doing.
Exactly, right? And so you have enough of those conversations, and you just sort of say, okay, well, maybe it's not as a good idea, right? And when I had the idea for Twilio, I'd go to developers who I knew who were friends of mine, and I'd say, hey, I'm working on this idea. And the idea is you'd have this API, and you could use it to initiate phone calls and send text messages and plug it into your code. And what I got was, they would say, interesting. Yeah, how about those Lions, right? And at first I said, oh, that's interesting. I guess this isn't,
they don't care.
I guess I'm not on something, right? But a funny thing happened every single time. We'd move on and we'd be talking about whatever, and about 4 minutes later, they'd say, hey, wait a minute. That idea you were talking about with the phone calls, could I do a shipping notification from my e-commerce site when the package ships? And I'd say, yes, you could. And they'd say, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Right? And this happened multiple times. And so what it led me to believe was that this was a tool that wasn't in the developer's tool belt. And if we put it in the developer's tool belt, they have these use cases. Like I had at 3 companies in a row, and like I was finding when I talked to those potential customers, they have use cases. It's just they didn't ever think that it was possible. So that's where we found our first customers, went around to developers, and we did it, first it was me and the other co-founders doing it one-to-one to validate the idea and try to get them on board and say, hey, just use it, just give us feedback.
Yeah.
Right? And then later you start to scale that, and you're going to meetups and developer conferences and all that kind of stuff. And we now have a significant number of developer evangelists around the world, but essentially replicating that same activity. Hey, did you know you could do this?
Right.
And there's all these use cases that I bet you already know about in the back of your head that when you identify them, now you know how to solve that problem.
And there's something about certain ideas that linger, right? I mean, I'm sort of what you're getting at is the idea lingered with you yourself as CTO of StubHub that there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And when you told it to people, you had to have that patience to let it linger with them in a way, right? I mean, they had to let it sit for a little bit and bake. Now, after you started getting them on the platform, was there a moment in time in the first couple of months or years that you yourself said, hey, we are providing, what was the moment in time where you came to the office and everybody high-fived and said, you know what, this is providing significant value to this company. I know you're very private about who uses the product, so you don't have to say the name of the company. But if you want to, you can, but if it's okay. But what type of company and what type of use case made it crystallize for everybody without a doubt that this would be a big business?
Yeah, the way we tend to think about it is, we're excited for our customers when they get value and when they innovate, when they figure something new out. And those are the moments when we get really excited, mostly for our customers. Like, we're excited for what we empowered them to do. And, I remember one, of course, was GroupMe, right? GroupMe was born at the TechCrunch Disrupt Hackathon in New York.
Yep.
They came to the hackathon with a rough idea. How can we let people collaborate on concerts? Because they went to a lot of concerts, and they said, we just need some way to better coordinate this. And they literally had not thought about SMS or anything like that. And they met our developer evangelist who was there, and said, if you check out our SMS API. And it was 6 months after we launched our SMS API. It was still brand new. And they just had a spark. We could use SMS, we could do this. And 12 hours later, it's born, and everybody at the hackathon is already using it and adopting it and growing. And it's just one of those events where you say, what developers need is infrastructure and platforms that provide enough utility that you can get going without a lot of friction, right? Because that's what the industry provides, friction, and that's what we were removing. But isn't so opinionated that it's a PBX or a call center.
Right.
It makes it easy, but also flexible enough that you can build a wide variety of things, and then the ingenuity of software people takes over. And that's what gets us so excited when we see that happening. A similar thing with, Uber.
Yeah.
Right? And you see the
your Uber is arriving.
Yeah, your Uber is arriving now, and and all those companies, Lyft and Airbnb, and all these companies who have this use case of, I'm going to coordinate a bunch of human beings at scale using software, right? That's the whole on-demand economy in many ways. Yet when I am trying to facilitate a transaction between those two, it turns out that communications is critical.
Right.
In fact, in some ways, you'd think the sharing economy is about communications. It's about putting two people together who never would have been together if it weren't for that service. And communications ends up being really how you consummate that transaction. And so seeing how they were able to use our service to really make those transactions safe and reliable and good for the company and good for both the parties involved, that's really cool when you see that come together. You're like, wow, I never would have thought that I would hit a button on my phone and a black car would pull up and that I would call the driver using Twilio, but apparently that's a thing, and we're really proud to be a part of that story in the same way that we're proud to be a part of GroupMe's story, or any number. Like Box is cool. Right,
another DFJ company, yeah.
Exactly, right. Box is using us for two-factor authentication, right? When you try to log into Box and you're from a computer they've never seen before that maybe is in Afghanistan, right?
Yeah,
and they
China.
say it's in China, right? Oh, we just sent you a text message to verify your identity. When we started the company in 2008, it never occurred to us that you would want to get a text message when you tried to log into some web property. Yet, as we all know today, it's practically required. Every login box on the internet needs two-factor authentication. And so this is one, again, where the ingenuity of software people used our platform for something we never intended, and those are the moments that get us most excited.
Yes, Citrix Sharefile, thank you for sponsoring This Week in Startups, and thanks for making a great product. Obviously, most of us use email to communicate with our clients and coworkers, but we frequently have to share important contracts, spreadsheets, presentations, photos, all this important stuff. And listen, a lot of the stuff's confidential, and it shouldn't be an email. It should be in a locked box, and that locked box is Sharefile, where you can put very file-level restrictions on files, find out when people are opening them or editing them, etc., and all the security breaches that happen in email will go away. There is a much better way to lock down these files while making them accessible, right? Because that's the conundrum: is how do I protect these files and share them, right? And that's where Sharefile comes in. So instead of attachments, you can just quickly send files of almost any size and control who has access to them and for how long, right? You can say, hey, you can have access to this for the week that we're doing this deal, but after that, I don't want you to have access to our books or our confidential roadmap, whatever it is. And you can use it on any platform, obviously, your computer or mobile devices. And we rely on it here for doing a lot of the document library stuff we do when we're angel investing in companies, right? We have files that only we can see, or some files that other investors can see. People can edit it, other people can't. You get the idea. It's super, super important that you use a professional product like Citrix Sharefile when you're sharing important documents. So go ahead and sign up for a 30-day free trial. There's no obligation. Go to sharefile.com and click on the radio microphone button. And when you click on that microphone button on the top of the homepage, just enter the promo code TWiST. Visit sharefile.com and use the promo code TWiST. It's a 30-day, no obligation, free trial, and it's a great product. And let's all thank at Citrix and at Sharefile on our Twitter handles for sponsoring independent media like This Week in Startups. Speaking of which, let's get back to this amazing episode.
I think William Gibson said it best: the street finds its own use for things, or in your case, the street finds its own use for technology.
Yeah.
How has your life changed as the founder of the company now that there's 350 people and probably 9 figures in revenue or whatever it is? How have you had to change as a leader, being the CTO, playing second fiddle to another person who was directing things, then becoming the CEO, getting product market fit, and then scaling? How has it changed for you on a personal level as the leader? And how have you had to change and sort of level up personally?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think one of the most influential things from my career was the time I spent at Amazon, right? Because I'd started multiple companies, and the thing that drew me to Amazon was I said, I've started 3 companies, and there was some degree of scale, but not a lot. My first company was about 50 people. StubHub, while I was there, was about 20 people. My third company was a bricks and mortar retailer of all things.
What was it called?
9-Star.
9-Star.
It was in Los Angeles.
This is your epic failure. How much money did you burn before it just absolutely crashed and burned? There's so much distance now, we can talk about it.
It wasn't that much given the grand scheme of things. Like, I mean, given what the money going on to, it was
millions of dollars.
6 million, 7. Yeah, it was,
what was it like?
Mostly from one investor, though, I will say.
When that went under, what was it like for you as an entrepreneur? Because this was your first time. That was your first time actually as an entrepreneur, right? As a CEO?
No, so I did my first company during the dot-com days, called Versity.com. Then StubHub, then this bricks and mortar retailer. And it's interesting, I'll go off on a tangent here for 1 second.
We love tangents.
I started I started StubHub as the first CTO. And about a year in, I realized, you know what? I don't go to a lot of concerts and I don't go to a lot of sporting events. And I just don't really care about the product at this company.
You weren't outside trying to score Laker tickets or Knicks tickets.
No, I mean, I was just I'm building this technology.
Yeah, but as a consumer, it's you weren't the customer.
What I started to realize was this was just e-commerce for something, and I don't really care what the something is.
Right.
Right, and I didn't really care about the customer, the ticket sellers, the buyer. They were just I was disinterested in what the product actually did in the world.
Yeah.
And that's bad, right? When you are putting in the hours you are as an entrepreneur, and you realize I don't viscerally care about the product. Because that's what gets you through the hard times and the long nights and the blood, sweat, and tears and all that. And so when I realized that is when I went to Jeff, who was the CEO, and I just said, hey, I think I think probably you'd be better served by someone who's really passionate about ticketing, passionate about fandom and sports fans and concert fans, all that kind of stuff. And so I went to look at what I wanted to do next. And one of my investors in my first company, Kevin O'Connor, was the founder of DoubleClick.
Of course, yeah.
And I was having lunch with him.
He's now doing
All the Best.
All the Best, which is a fascinating product to check out.
Yeah. And so I was having lunch with him, and he said, why don't you come out to my home in the Hamptons and spend the next 6 to 12 months brainstorming and researching ideas for a new company, and then we'll start it.
Yeah.
I said, well, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I grabbed one of my other co-founders from my first company. We went out to the Hamptons in the middle of the winter, and it was desolate.
Yeah.
If you've ever been out to the Hamptons,
it's pretty barren.
It's barren in the winter. In the summer, it's hopping. In the winter, they don't even plow the roads. Right. We used to order stuff from Amazon just so the UPS truck would come and plow it for us.
Right.
And
that's a good hack.
Yeah. And
right now, a bunch of people in Buffalo are ordering stuff from Amazon.
Exactly, right. Go do that, yes. Yeah. And we'd also invite the guy who was lonely. There's no one out there. We're hey, come on in, have a cup of coffee.
Not creepy at all.
Oh, that's how it is in the Hamptons in the winter. And so we brainstormed 1,000 ideas, about 100 were decent. We wrote 20 business plans. And strangely, the one we started was this bricks and mortar retailer for extreme sporting goods. skateboarding, snowboarding, surfing, BMX biking. We looked at it, it was a $16 billion market, growing pretty fast because the X Games and all that. And yet there was no substantial retail presence. It was all mom and pops. And then your requisite Walmart business. And we said there's room for like the REI of this industry, and actually the market was twice as big as that of REI's for hiking, climbing, camping. We said those are the granola sports, we're the Pop-Tart sports. And so we started this company, moved to Los Angeles and started it, and a year in, guess what happened? Do I look like a surfer?
No, Kevin does.
Do I look like a skateboarder, right?
Not exactly.
I kind of realized I'd made the same mistake again. I'd started a company because it sounded like an interesting business plan and an interesting business model, but I didn't viscerally care about the audience. In fact, so I was working in the back of our prototype store, programming and writing systems, right, to make the companies. We had this idea: we use technology to build a great retailer, and I'm like actively annoyed by our customers because of these skate rats, like. Skating, we had a skate park in the store, and they skated on everything in the store.
Yeah.
Like they were like grinding the handrails in the store. That we kind of designed it that way to be cool, but like, man, all I heard all day was like the slam of these skate decks, and I actually came to like kind of hate our customers, which was really bad thing.
So there is
right?
and
so the takeaway I had here was like, look, if you're gonna be an entrepreneur, you're gonna start a company, you had better love the product that you're building. You had better viscerally believe that the world needs your product, and you better love working with the customers that you have, or else you will not make it the distance.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I took away. That's also when I went to Amazon, because I said, I've done these 3 companies. I want to build a great company one day. That's why I'm an entrepreneur. I don't know what that looks like. I've never worked in a big company. And so I wanted to go work in a great, well-run company. And
what did you learn? And what's Bezos like?
There's so much there.
Give me the top thing you learned. If you think about it for a second, top 2 things you learned. And then why is Bezos so amazing?
Intellectual rigor. In the decision making.
Unpack that. How does it manifest?
Here's the best example. Have you guys heard of the 6-pager thing at Amazon?
I have.
Right?
Explain it. Yeah.
So the whole notion of Amazon, PowerPoint is banned at Amazon. Every decision is made as the result of somebody writing a roughly 6-page written narrative describing a problem, the possible solutions, and the recommended solution. And you cannot write 6 pages, like a essay, like a college essay. You cannot write 6 pages without having a point of view and without having some intellectual rigor behind it. Because actually, for smart people, if you do try to write 6 pages without a point of view, it's very clear very quickly that you're full of shit, right? Yeah. And that's not tolerated. But you can very easily put together 30 PowerPoint slides that are completely full of shit.
Great font work, though.
Yeah, and get away with it. Yeah. And so that's one of my favorite takeaways from Amazon, and that is what we do.
Do they make people read it out loud?
No, what you do...
What happens in the meeting?
No, you read it. Most meetings start with 15 minutes of silence as everyone is sitting there reading the document. And what I like about it, and this is a great tangible example of a degree of intellectual rigor that would go on at Amazon around justifying decisions and about deep thought. That went into that decision making. The other thing that I thought was fascinating about Amazon that I really liked was the bar raiser program.
Okay, explain what that is.
So at some point they realized that the natural tendency for a company as it grows is for the quality of the talent to essentially diminish if you don't actively work against that trend, right? Just because as you need more and more and more people.
Atrophy.
Yeah, well, and you just start to say, there's the whole A hires hire A, B hires C, there's that notion. And then there's just the notion that as you need a greater quantity of people, like law of large numbers, it will necessarily, drift in order to fill seats. And so they implemented this bar raiser program. And the bar raiser said is that every person we hire is going to be better than the 50th percentile of the people in the company today. Right? And you sort of say, okay, well, how? And they said, well, we're going to have this team of sort of elite interviewers who are on every interview loop, who are trained in identifying key leadership traits, and they are on every interview loop. And they're the one who's specifically there to try to ascertain, is this candidate sitting in front of me better than what I think, the 50th percentile is at the company today. And the other fascinating thing about the bar raisers is that the bar raiser is never on the team that is hiring the person. So you may have a team who's saying, oh my God, our system's on fire, and this seat's been empty for 6 months, I gotta put someone there. You're good enough, come on in, like you're gonna solve my problem, right? You've got someone who doesn't really care at all about the problem of that team,
right?
Who's just looking out for the benefits of the company. And saying, we're raising the bar of the company. And so I know it may be a short-term decision that you have to fill that role with someone who is a compromise. Long-term, that is the wrong decision, and I'm there to make sure the company makes the right decision at every step of the way. And so you really see this systems thinking approach to problems, this long-term view, and this intellectual rigor. And I think these things come together in a picture that, I'm very bullish on Amazon, and every time, earnings come out and they say Amazon's wildly unprofitable,
by design.
My gut is that there is a fairly interesting set of investments that are driving that, story that, look, some of them are going to work, some of them are not, but I bet on companies who make bets.
Right.
Did you see that weird speaker thing they announced last week?
Yeah, pretty interesting, actually.
I don't know.
It's but sort of like what? Siri manifested in the real world, because everybody can go and say, hey, we need milk. And I don't know if anybody uses Amazon Fresh, but it's pretty amazing how quickly things come. And for the people who are not tech savvy to be able to press the button and just say, we need a quart of milk, and it says, you'll get a quart of milk.
Sure, but you could say, is your phone a better way to do that? And the speaker's always listening.
I have no idea.
Anyway, whatever it is, I don't care, right? The Fire phone.
What did you learn from Bezos? Give us a Bezos story, aside from laughing like a hyena for 90 seconds.
That is absolutely
It literally is true, right? It's like he'll just be like, ha, 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 like that loud.
It's not sociopathic like that, but
no.
It's...
Well, go ahead, do it. But it doesn't stop, right?
It goes on. So I was at a urinal next to him one day, and I was on a team of product managers. All 3 people on my team were named Jeff. It was embarrassing, actually. Like, you'd walk into a meeting and like,
this is my brother Daryl, this is my other brother Daryl.
Yeah, right. They'd be like, oh, the Jeffs are here. It was really embarrassing. And so I'm at a urinal next to him one day, and I said, hey, I have a question for you, Jeff.
Not creepy at all, by the way.
Not creepy at all. Whatever,
Yeah.
Is there a higher propensity in Amazon to hire people named Jeff than in other companies? And the answer was...
Not awkward. All right.
Hopefully he was still hitting the mark, but...
All right. Our time is up. Should I end? Do I have to end? Can we just do this for another half hour? You've been dropping so much knowledge.
But in all seriousness, though, the thing about Bezos that I respect the most is the willingness to keep trying and the willingness to run experiments, the extreme willingness to run experiments. And I see that speaker, and I'm like, I think that's stupid. But you know what? I applaud them for trying. And there's going to be some other thing that may or may not be stupid that's going to launch tomorrow. And that's what makes up that company, and that's what I respect tremendously, and what I strive to emulate in building Twilio.
My one question that I need to get answered, and then we're going to wrap up, is what have you had to do on a personal basis to level up as CEO as you've scaled now to this, if anything? Like, what do you focus on in personal development? Is there an area that you were weak at during these 6 years that you've worked to get better at?
Absolutely. I mean, we're all working to get better all the time, and the job of the CEO of a rapidly growing company changes, I'd say, about every 6 months. I had to really rethink how I was doing the job. And, I think the thing that I try to work on the most is the right level of detail. And one of the things that I've struggled to figure out, and I've actually struggled to figure out how they do this at Amazon, because I don't understand, and I've actually talked to a lot of the leaders at Amazon to try to form a picture of how or whether this even works at all at Amazon, is you want to instill ownership in your teams. You want them to be accountable for the outcome that their team produces. That's how you scale, and that's how you get passionate people to do their best work. The flip side is the common thread that I see among leaders that I respect is that they care about the details and they drive their teams to do the best.
Jobs.
Elon Musk. Bezos, Musk, like the leaders that a lot of us would admire. And you say, how do you reconcile these two things? I want to hold you as the owner and hold you accountable, but I'm going to come in and tell you every detail of what needs to happen, right? Like, those two things are completely incompatible with each other, yet how do you make them both work? And great companies, I think there is some degree of both of those things working, where you use that attention to detail to drive the best work and the best ownership MO out of your people. But I've at times swung to the okay, I'm going to treat you like an owner, and I may have opinions, and I may think that that's not good enough, but I'm going to let you figure that out on your own.
And the product came out bad.
And then your customers suffer.
Right.
And then the flip side is you have somebody who you go in and say, hey, look, you got to do this.
And you've done that.
And I've done that at times. And then you end up with leaders who give up and say, all right, just tell me what to do.
So how do you say it now? When somebody comes in with a product and you look at it and you go, it's 80%.
Okay, so and then here's the other one, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to make some recommendations. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm going to give you feedback and see if you take it. And I've actually found that comes off as almost passive aggressive. And so there's this continuum of how to get the best out of your teams, how to set a very high bar for what you expect out of the company and for the teams out of protection and respect for your customers and what customers expect from you. But also building up the capabilities of the team. It's a really hard problem to solve.
And you haven't figured it out yet.
And what I would say to Amazon, when I've asked people at Amazon, why does this seem at least to work at Amazon? And by the way, Amazon's got a lot of employees for which it doesn't work out. The answer I got was that, which is interesting, Jeff Bezos is right a lot of the time. So there's a certain bit to that, right?
Faith in the leader.
Faith in the leader, right? If he tends to be right, you just tend to really want to listen and take his feedback. And so there's that. So try to be right a lot, I guess. And then the other thing, though, is that a leader at Amazon may write a team about some detail, and that may be annoying. And I was a recipient of this when I was at Amazon. I was like, this is really annoying. Like, why? Yeah. Get off my case, right?
Yeah, stop grinding me.
But at the same time, they're right. It's the right thing for the customer. And in the back of your head, you're like, I know it's right. Maybe I'm annoyed because you're screwing with my timelines or making us work later. Whatever, the things that would bug you about, God, get off my back, right? But at the same time, when the leadership is right about the right thing to do for the customer, it gives you the excuse to say, you know what, we need to go the extra mile, right? And then you build a culture of that. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Lawson. Amazing amount of knowledge, and thank you for sharing with all of us. Absolutely. Hey, everybody, welcome back. So, Obama, you worked on the reelection campaign.
Yes.
And what would you say was the major factor from a technology and communication standpoint that led to the victory?
Well, there's a couple things, but first, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be in front of all of you. I think the two things that we learned about technology in the campaign is, one, that technology is best used to augment normal people tasks.
Yep.
And so on the campaign, you have 2 to 4 million volunteers that are doing a lot of work, and our technology was there to fill in some of the cracks, to make their work much faster, much more efficient. So if they're putting in 60 hours, it was worth 80 or 100 hours. And the second thing was that there's some really cool stuff you can do with data, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, specifically around micro-targeting, making sure that when you're asking someone to do something, that it's the right person to ask and the right task and the right thing to ask them to do. Whether it's giving money or going to an event or just participating in some way.
So you were micro-targeting, using big data to find out who is somebody who might be on the fence for voting, or who might be sympathetic to give a $25 donation to buy more TV ads, whatever it is?
Yeah, basically that. And one of the interesting things, just this last week, Facebook announced that they're not allowing this kind of targeting anymore that we did, which is an interesting thing that kind of happened. And
what was their rationale for that? It's too creepy or
annoying.
Too effective?
I'm not sure. It's probably
annoying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It depends how it works. I think that we whenever we'd get on the phone with a Facebook because something wasn't working, oftentimes they would say, "You're doing what?" Like, why are you doing this? And then we would tell them why, and it would be like, oh, well, you're not supposed to use it that way. When you publish an API, you sometimes don't get the choice of how people use that API. Yeah. And we were pushing a lot of limits.
What role does email play in all of this? Because it seems to me that there was an incredibly deft and fast use of email by the campaign.
Yes.
I felt like whatever issue I was just hearing about on social media, I would get a very full, considered letter from the president.
Yep.
That day or that night or the next day.
Or like about Big Bird, for instance.
Sure.
One of the things that we had was this great team of people that did email. They were I think there was about 12 of them. They were all mid-20s, young women, which is, I think, really funny that they were the ones piping out the emails from Bill Clinton and the president. But the key there was email works very well. And I'm sure you guys see this in your businesses, that email, for whatever reason, converts incredibly well. Even with Google's divisions of the inbox, making it so those emails sometimes don't get in your main inbox, they still convert very well. Most of the money that we made, if I don't have a number on top of my head, but I would say a huge amount of it was made via email. I think total online, we did about 650, maybe $700 million online donations. And I wouldn't be surprised if 600 of that was done via email.
How much, now that you were very involved in this and looked at the data, how much of electing the next president will be about this type of thing, micro-targeting, and making the campaign volunteers more efficient versus, say, the actual issues at hand?
This is a good question, and I get this question a lot, especially when we start talking about like 1984 and all these kind of big issues, right? Where you're saying, if I had this perfectly targeted campaign, I could go to every single door and say the issue that makes sense for that person,
right,
and have them appeal to me and think I'm suddenly this beautiful, multifaceted candidate rather than a real person. And luckily, thus far, I don't think our targeting is good enough to do that.
Right.
So I don't think it's a worry that we will see immediately, but it is something that we need to be considerate of.
Yeah.
We see this a lot with organizations, companies, marketers. Huge companies like Amazon who are doing such a good job of targeting with their email campaigns and their online ads, retargeting, etc. What I do see, all this stuff will be very important in 2016 and further campaigns, but you still have to have a good candidate. We see this all the time.
There is that.
There is that.
Yeah.
You see this all the time in the startup world, right, where you have a great product and it fails.
Right.
You still have to have the surrounding team. You have to have everything together. And if the candidate, for whatever reason, is great, that gets you very much further.
Yeah.
And people see through the wavering, the issue changing, and all of that. And the other thing is the internet's pretty transparent. And so you might be able to market one-on-one with direct mail or email, but once you get on Twitter, once you get on a Facebook, and you start being a little bit hard to pin down, people don't like that.
Knowing what you know, if you were the God King of the United States and could say, here's how democracy should work given the power of these tools, what would you do?
This is obviously a very interesting question. I think I would focus a lot on how can we use internet and the freedom of the internet to democratize access to legislation, to government, etc. It seems that it's sometimes very hard to participate in our government, whether it's voter access or various other issues. Sometimes it's very hard for people to participate. And so how do we open that up a little bit? How do we make it so that it's actually easy for people to participate? And I think the internet will do that. We've seen a lot with Italy, with the 5 Stars movement that was there.
Explain what that is.
The 5 Stars movement was, there was this candidate named Beppe Grillo in Italy. And honestly, it just totally screwed up Italy's political system. But in the beginning, it really helped to organize this youth that felt disenfranchised by the other political parties to participate on what they called online democracy. They're a party system, so it's much more complex than that. But they were able to appeal towards these people and say, if you come online and vote inside of our party, we'll represent that vote once we are elected. It didn't really work for anyone. It kind of made Italy in a...
Politics as a service?
Politics as a service, yeah. But we see this a lot. There's some really cool organizations here in the US. I think one's called Run For. There's a couple others that are trying to do this. How do you enable all this stuff that we use for Twitter, for Facebook, et cetera, but for gathering issues and really making a difference. And obviously, security is a big issue. You'd be surprised the amount of security is required for these things, but you'd also be surprised the amount of security that's required for America's Got Talent. So I think it's achievable.
So again, knowing sort of what you know and looking at the massive change we've seen in the last 10 years of our lives, the public's desire for marijuana to be decriminalized or legalized, actually resulting in that happening.
Yeah.
The people's demand that all people be treated equally in terms of marriage, and that actually happening. But then we have other issues, gun control, et cetera, where maybe it's not happening. Are you net optimistic that we are in control as citizens and what we want and our will is going to be represented by them? Or do you feel like this is going to create tools when say the Republicans catch up, or, and I'm not, I don't want to make it a political thing here, but the Republicans obviously going to catch up here. Do you think this is going to actually result in us not getting what we want from our government?
I don't know. I guess we'll see. I think that it will result in, like all things U.S. politics, the amount we put in as citizens and constituents will result in the amount we get out.
Yeah.
And there is one of the things that we saw a lot over the last year was a lot of kerfluffle about the NSA.
Yeah.
And I don't think people really care about it, which is why I don't think we're seeing change. If we had an issue, if there was a way to describe that to people where they cared about it, I think people would really get together and make a change. And I think all the issues you described, guns, etc., all those big issues, they're either aggressively nuanced or complex. And so people aren't able to communicate them, and so you don't see what seems to be the easy answer actually happening. Whereas marijuana, everyone just wants to smoke weed apparently, so that worked out.
We just did. So
I don't even know.
It was good stuff, kid.
Colorado is crazy right now, by the way.
So let's talk a little bit about security. It's a really interesting topic. Anonymous, they seem to be. I wonder how you look at them in terms of their unique brand of justice, which is being deployed in real time against people who are truly bad actors. But it does feel a little bit out of control at times to have vigilantism.
Yeah.
How do you look at that group?
I try not to have a lot of opinions about Anonymous. Probably
it's kind of dangerous
for fear of retribution.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things about Anonymous,
I think they're awesome.
Is next question.
Full support.
There's actually two things here. One was when I did a lot of media training on the campaign, because for whatever reason they put me in front of the media sometimes. And one of the things they said is if you get to a question that's really hard or you don't want to answer, just say, this is a very nuanced topic. And so
you did that to me just earlier.
This is a very nuanced topic.
Okay.
The thing about Anonymous, I think, that's fascinating is oftentimes they're doing things that we kind of wished we could do, right? Mm-hmm. They're a superhero of sorts for the internet, but they're also this trickster. There's a woman named Gabriella Coleman who writes a lot of great books about this, about Anonymous, and she does a really good job of talking about how they're this trickster kind of persona within our society. And this is a complex identity.
It's nuanced.
But it scares the shit out of me as well, right? Because one of the exciting things now about being hacked is it used to be hacked like, Jason and I start a company, it's hacked. What happens? It's espionage. Now, Jason and I start a company, it's hacked. All of our emails are now on the internet.
Right.
And our credit cards are there, and they have all of our user accounts, and it's leaking that's coupled with the security issues and security incidents that actually is the most frightening thing. And this is obviously not just Anonymous, this is just generally kind of the atmosphere around security right now. Is there's a lot of leaking, which is scary. I mean, and I'm sure waking up and hearing that your credit cards have all leaked or your usernames and passwords have leaked is not great. But if you look at the graph of how often this has happened, it's happening more and more and more recently than it used to. And I think it's just people are more savvy about it, as well as I think we as companies are not writing good enough software.
And back to the NSA stuff, because it is super related. What are your thoughts on our big companies and their involvement with the government, and prior to it being disclosed, post it being disclosed, and now, say, them encrypting, data centers between data centers, and even the iPhone basically saying to the FBI, CIA, like, we're going to encrypt this, you can't get into it. Then the FBI holds it up and says, we're really pissed off that we can't get into this. which I think means they can get into it, because that's what you'd say if you could get into it.
Well, I mean, this is, once again, another nuanced topic. We have a good run here. But the key thing about the NSA, the thing that makes this a hard conversation, even my crazy lefty friends would have a hard time with this, is there are actual people out there who are trying to hurt us.
Right.
And so when you throw that into the equation, I remember speaking at an anti-terrorism event a few years ago. What was it? Counterterrorism, or Countering Violent Extremism 2.0. That was the conference name.
Yeah. Building off the 1.0, which was...
You do. This is the new 2.0. And I do this presentation about crowdsourcing and how we can use crowdsourcing to try and create communities. And this guy raises his hand. He's like, this is great. Good job. Good presentation. However, my community is trying to kill me. So what do I do? And I was like, I got to go. Because I don't know. Like, I'm from the internet, right? No one is trying to kill me, theoretically, on the internet. Or if they are, it's just, trolls and whatnot. But the thing that's complex about this is if you are an AOL or a Google or a Yahoo or a Facebook, and you receive one of these letters, there's very little that you can actually do.
Right.
And we saw with LavaBit where they just shut down.
Right. He was like encrypted email.
And
did he wind up going to jail even, or
no? But it was quite a problem.
Right.
And I don't know if it's a very hard decision. And if you're not in a place to just shut down your company and go like this to the government, then what are you going to do? You kind of have to participate, especially if you want to succeed in doing this. But once again, I would like to call back that I don't think anyone cares about this issue. I think we all act like we care, but if we were to, how many people here care about that the NSA is reading our email? Okay, keep your hands up. Put your hands down if you have deleted your Facebook account and your Gmail account. Okay, so that's like 2 people out of all of them?
Right.
So first of all, only 4 people raised their hands and said they cared. Then of those 4, 2 of them actually did something about it. And this is pretty much typical unless you're in Germany, where everyone cares about it because they're Germans.
Yeah.
But they still have Facebook accounts, which I also think is really humorous.
Yeah.
But it's...
Well, they have good reason.
Oh, they have
the
a cultural,
Stasi and
they have
history.
Definitely a cultural identity about data and where it can go, which we don't have.
Right.
Maybe we will, if we go to this logical conclusion that we sometimes think we may, but it is a complex issue because I don't think people care. And so when people don't care and they're not willing to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong, then why would you make a different decision if you were a Google or a Yahoo? I do find it interesting, however, that WhatsApp just started using the technology from Whisper Systems, the text secure stuff, which is a really cool encryption plan for end-to-end encryption with the chats on WhatsApp. That's a pretty baller move.
Well, what is that technology? Can you explain it to somebody who is non-technical?
What it means theoretically is that if you send me a chat and I respond and send you a chat, that people shouldn't be able to see that chat.
Right.
That there's end-to-end encryption between our chats. This probably isn't making everyone in our government very happy.
Yeah, it's perfect for certain groups of people.
Nefarious organizations or normal people like my mom.
Yeah. So let's skip over to bro culture and diversity in tech. It's been quite a explosive topic for the last couple of years with a lot of bad behavior going on. Do you think that largely our industry has an issue of misogyny, bro culture? Do you think we have a small number of bad actors? Is it systematic? What are your thoughts on it?
Can I just say yes?
To everything? No, you just say it's nuanced.
Well, I don't think it actually is that nuanced. So I think it's not just the industry. I think it's probably a lot of history, Western culture, et cetera. I think it's much more complex than just our industry.
But people,
I do think, however,
there's a lot of people who believe our industry specifically has a very big problem.
I do think that our industry makes it very hard to not be a white dude inside of the industry. For instance, I hire engineers a lot, and I have an easier time hiring an engineer that is a red-headed dude with a red beard than a person of color or a woman. Now, the thing about redheads is we're theoretically going extinct, whereas women are not.
Right.
So this is a weird thing, right? Like the fact that I can hire the group of people that is theoretically going extinct easier than I can hire a woman or a person of color. And why is that? And I think there's lots of reasons why, and I don't want to necessarily talk about, pipeline or education or anything like that, because I think although those are all things that we need to fix, I don't think that's the real issue. I think the real issue is that oftentimes when you walk into a room and you see a bunch of people that don't look like you, don't act like you, and the first interaction with them is aggression, through our interviewing process that we normally have within tech, is like, let me show you how smarter I am when I'm sitting here and watching you do a whiteboard problem,
right.
Or let me ask you a brain teaser, then of course we're pushing people away. And so I think, one of the things that we've done, we started this towards the end of the Obama campaign when we kind of failed to hire some of the people that we wish we could hire, but one of the things we did on my new company is we tried to really install, specifically with tech interviews, empathy within those tech interviews. So how do we make sure that we're interviewing a person for how they would work, that we're bringing them through things that are hard? So if they don't know something, it isn't like, what the fuck, you don't know this? It's more like, well, how do we work together to get that? Because if we're working together, I'm not just going to be like, God, Jason, I can't believe you don't know this. This is ridiculous. Get out of here. You're going to work together to find out how you can actually get that done. And we've had pretty good success with that. But one of the things that I think we don't do a lot is we don't talk about our failures within that. And we had a lot of failures to get to that point. And I do think there is an issue, and I do think that most of the people that I see are perpetrators of it don't realize that there is an issue.
Right. There seems to be a group of people who deny the issues there. There seems to be a group of people who are very vocal about it, and then there's this large mass in the middle who are kind of working on it, right?
Yeah, and for me, this is complex, right? I mean, it's a very complex issue. This is a hard one to quantify, and it's really easy for me to be like, yeah, guys, let's hire people, as the white dude with all the power, right? Yeah, we should solve this
Super
problem.
groovy of you, yeah.
But what I'm finding is by hiring people that I wouldn't normally hire, people from different cultural identities, people from different, older people, younger people, and we've really tried to make our team very diverse. We're getting a lot of different insight into how our product would be used. And so someone who may not normally be the demographic we think is like, oh, well, this might work really well for something we would never have thought of. And so actually our product is being built by people who are better at building our product, more innovative, more insightful, because of their cultural experiences.
So tell us, what is Modest, your company you're working on in Chicago? You've raised an angel round. I know you got a big client in Intelligentsia, the awesome coffee company.
Modest is we're a small company in Chicago, mobile commerce. It's an SDK that you can drop in any app to power commerce. So if you guys are trying to sell stuff through your apps, let us know. We'd love to talk.
But it's interesting because merchandise is a major component now in the revenue stream of not only things like movies and Star Wars and Frozen, but we're seeing all of those things now happen to apps, correct?
Well, we all saw Rovio, and we're so excited about the success there. There's this huge opportunity, I think, for... what does that mean?
That's a little notice that Jason needs to end the interview, because he always goes over.
So anyway, it's a really great business.
And he never listens to people who say, get off the stage.
Should I just leave? Is that what happens now?
No, you can finish your sentence. They're just going to do it every minute. Keep going.
So basically, when we looked at this, we were like, well, all these great brands, when you look at Candy Crush, how many people have downloaded it besides everyone else? Every single person in the world has downloaded Candy Crush. And we see merch created from this. We see it distributed into our pop culture, into our world. But we're like, why isn't the mobile app itself a channel?
Right.
And so that's something that one of the many things we're trying to solve.
And you're running it in Chicago. You raised an angel round.
Yep.
Why aren't you here, just absolutely crushing it in this market? Do you feel like you're ankling yourself in Chicago?
This is an easier question to answer in Chicago because I think I'll get beat up as I leave the room.
It's also cold.
It's cold. So one of the main reasons one of the things we learned on the campaign is when you're not inside of the bubble.
It is a bubble, sure.
When you're not inside of the bubble, when you're not inside of that echo chamber, you can kind of both be a little bit more under the radar. You get this opportunity for access to various resources that you're competing with a huge amount of people here for. And more importantly, I can rent an apartment for like $800.
Cool.
So we just have apartments all over the place. We go to a different one every day.
And the Hyperloop between here and Chicago is very close.
Soon.
I talked to Elon earlier.
But the real key here is that we have all the resources we need. Yeah. We're competing at the same global level that we're all competing for talent. Our company is distributed. It's very easy for us to hire here or in New York or wherever our engineers want to be. And with all these great tools that we have, we're all getting closer. And so
The Slacks of the world, the
Slacks
HipChats
of the world. I don't know about HipChat, but the other tools of the world, we're able to really communicate. And so having a Google Chrome box that sits on a TV that we can easily kind of just video chat with anytime we want is cheap and largely free, and it works very well. And so we don't see these differences. And the other thing is, like 5-6 years ago, when I would come and talk to VCs here, they would say, when you move to San Francisco or the Bay Area, let us know, and maybe we can work together.
Yeah.
4 years ago, when I'd come, they'd say, I was just in Chicago visiting one of our companies, Braintree. That's great. And then 3 years.
So VCs are getting on planes.
Well, just like a year ago, I was here talking to a VC, and he was like, I was in Raleigh. And I was like, do you even know where Raleigh is? Because it's
gate 32.
We have to compete with all these places that are doing it.
Awesome.
We're going to get fired.
Everybody follow at Harper, and the company is modest.com. Oh, you got modest.com?
Well,
And you got at Harper? You're good at acquiring these premium handles and stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, Harper. At Harper.